us? All right, so welcome everyone. Great to have you with us. We've had around 115 or more folks register for the call, so we're recording it so that folks can, who are on the call now can always go back and watch parts of it if they want to, but and then those who are not able to join during this particular time slot can catch up with all the exciting conversation and explorations that we're going to be getting into today. My name's Sean Hargens. I'm the founder of MetaIntegral, and I'm based here in Sebastopol, California. And I'm here with Shanthi Gaia, who's based in Massachusetts, and Claudia Meglin, who is based right now in Germany, though her heart is always in Iceland, and she lives near me in the Bay Area. And then Arnie Carlson, who is a native of Iceland and a good friend of mine. And so we're kind of the core team here with the Iceland event coming up. And, this call that we're having today, is kind of emerged out of this Iceland seminar on the MetaImpact framework that we're doing in April. And we wanted to just kind of share some of the cool topics and explorations that we're doing in preparation for that event and make this conversation more widely available to people who are not necessarily interested in Iceland per se and going to that seminar, but are just really interested in tracking the conversation and these ideas around expanded frameworks of capital and how we might apply that to areas like healthcare and what does it look like to build software, that supports all of this. So we decided to have this call in order to create this larger conversation and share with people kind of some of the momentum that's building as we get ready for Iceland. Let me just quickly go over the agenda so people have a sense of where we're headed. We're going to hear from Shanthi in just a moment, just kind of contextualizing things with respect to triple bottom line approaches and how we're in a unique opportunity where that's expanding in exciting ways and how we're trying to contribute to kind of the evolution of triple bottom line approaches. Then I'll give a brief overview of the MetaImpact framework. So those of you who are new to it at least have a little orientation as to kind of what the heck we're talking about and some of the key terms and distinctions that we use in that model. Then we'll move into the first of our two topics, which will be talking about software development for value accounting and how we can build dashboards and even some connections to cryptocurrency. And then that'll help kind of frame things up and introduce a few things that allow us to then move into the topic of healthcare. And Arnie will be sharing with us some details around his sense of how this applies to healthcare in Iceland. And then I'll give some examples of, the framework used in the context of healthcare in Australia, just to help deepen kind of what's possible. And along the way, we're going to be stopping and checking in with the folks who have joined us just to hear questions and comments and reflections, because we really want to create an interactive opportunity for all of us to kind of be exploring these juicy ideas and be part of this larger conversation. And also as we're going, if you have a comment or question that you don't want to kind of interrupt, whoever's speaking, you can just type it into the chat room space and send it to everyone. And then we as the facilitators will be monitoring that, and then we'll weave in responses to those comments or suggestions as we go. But that's a kind of easy way to kind of get things visible that might be on your mind and for us to be sure to include everyone's questions and ideas. And Claudia will be kind of helping to manage the mute unmute for folks just to make sure we don't have a lot of background noise. So as we get going here, I'd love to just hear briefly from all the folks who have joined us. You can say your name, where you're from, and just maybe mention a key question or key area of interest that you have that kind of brings you to the call, so that we can start to dynamically steer what we have lined up to share with you today, so that it addresses and engages those topics and areas of interest for each of you. So shall we start with you, Mary, since you're...
Okay, sure. Well, obviously the current way we are conducting economics is imploding.
Yeah.
And you know, the master or the mistress, we might say, of economics is, of course, nature herself, because she has an extremely ridiculously effective economic structure.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about how humans might, you know, the virtual sphere is here. It's going to be here for probably as long as I'm alive, and unless Werner Herzog is right and some crazy solar flare destroys everything. But I'm curious about how our new way of exploring what you're calling wisdom economies, which I love that name, might include, you know, some biomimicry and the wisdom of the laws of nature and the laws of the universe. So that's something I'm very curious about, and that's a part of the reason why I would like to explore with you all. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mary. And Kayla, who's also kind of part of our extended team, but would great to have you introduce yourself and share any key topic that's on your mind.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's nice to be here with everyone. Hello. Calling in from Portland, and part of my passion around all this relates to regenerative design, and I work with Village Lab, and one of the projects that I'm the most excited about that connects in with the MetaImpact very directly is Regen Solutions, which is where we're developing solutions that are making positive impact across all those bottom lines, and developing value in multiple streams, and being able to measure that value and have it integrated into those systems, and have all those, like the complexity of it all, be able to be mapped out and communicated. Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how we can do that, and the traction that we're getting on being able to do that in a way that's really honoring life and living systems. So kind of echoing what Mary was saying there too, like how it's designed with living systems principles. And the mycelium is one of the ones that biometaphors that makes the most sense to me lately, for sure. Yeah. Great to be here with everyone.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, one of my first little shingle out as a coach and consultant was called Rhizome Designs, because I'm so fascinated with, you know, the image of a rhizome. So very cool, Kayla. Gary, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, Gary Huffaker. I'm interested in this primarily from the standpoint of healthcare. I'm a retired Kaiser Permanente physician, and lover of all things integral, a graduate of JFK and student of Sean's from a few years ago. And I miss that community, so this is my flailing attempt to connect in some way with all of you. And so healthcare would be my primary interest, and you know, we see the changes in this country now being even eroded, and so I'm really concerned about what, you know, the kind of impact this is going to have as the years roll by and people become less and less sure of their physical health.
Great. Good to have you with us today, Gary. And my newfound neighbor, Pam. Love to hear from you. Oh, you're still on mute. There we go.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have been a lifelong environmentalist and whole systems thinker, and working with Claudia, I learned about your work. I don't know a whole lot yet about the exact thrust of your efforts, but everything I'm hearing, I totally agree with. I believe we are going to be realigned with nature one way or another, and so why not do it thoughtfully and proactively? And that we have a real opportunity now, I believe, to think significantly about this, and hopefully to do for my little part while I'm still here on the planet, to contribute to moving important conversation forward. So
great. Yeah, and it's one of the reasons we chose Iceland was because the nature is just so stunningly provocative and such a powerful reminder of how we need to really be shifting our relationship to Mother Earth. So great. Thanks, Pam. And Tom, welcome. We're just going around and just hearing briefly from folks and where they're from and key question or area of focus that they have that brings them to the call. So why don't you go ahead if you're willing to jump in and share with us a little bit about you, and then we'll hear from Hugo from Brazil.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So I've studied the integral framework for 15 or 20 years, and I've also studied spiral dynamics in great depth. I produced a DVD on spiral dynamics many years ago.
Oh, cool.
Called a Challenge to Leadership with Don Beck. And I am a relationship coach. I'm a speaker, trainer, facilitator. And I'm interested in using second tier and higher modes to call people up to a higher place to be.
Wonderful. Yeah. We all need to be engaged in that, in whatever ways our unique strengths allow us to contribute. So, thank you for speaking to that so powerfully. And Hugo from Brazil, share with us quickly kind of what brings you to our call today.
Yeah. So firstly, I'm sorry because my webcam is not working.
That's okay.
So, yeah, but well, from this side of the world, in the South Hemisphere, everything is quite different. I was born in Angola, but due to the Civil War, I moved to Brazil. And in Brazil, I studied oceanography, and I'm working since then trying to facilitate conversations and dialogue among local communities, mainly traditional communities, and companies and government. So this is a very difficult task, and what I'm realizing is that we are living like a polarization in the society. It's become more difficult, or in some situations almost impossible, to people who are available to talk with others. And my key question, Sean, is how can we cope or overcome or maybe lead with this tendency of the polarization, the extremism, to create new realities?
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I've worked for several years on a body of work called Polarity Dynamic, which Arnie was in a seminar with me last year around. And so, yeah, I'm very interested in how do we engage polarities and work with them. And in fact, the MetaCapital framework is a strategy of working with multiple polarities, which we can highlight. So great, wonderful to hear from all of you. And so I want to just turn it over to Shanthi, who's going to take a minute or two to just kind of set the larger context as to kind of what we're doing. And many of you have already kind of spoken to aspects of it with respect to nature and sustainability. So Shanthi, if you can give us a sense of what's the big goal here.
Sure. I'm going to do just a couple of slides and show kind of how this all fits in. So Mary, mentioned how our economic system is flawed fundamentally. And so in the 1700s, Adam Smith, developed this system that didn't account for social and environmental externalities. Jump forward, we have in the 60s, beginning of social movements, environmental movements. And in 1994, the triple bottom line was first used. Jump to today's world, and sustainability, triple bottom line, which means accounting for people, planet, and profits, has become widely accepted and almost even, demanded. Almost all companies now are doing some type of reporting on this triple bottom line type of idea. Just very recently, one of the largest investors in the world said they're no longer going to invest in any company that doesn't positively contribute to society. And so there's a massive need for this. Reporting 3.0 has synthesized
No. Did Shanti freeze? Did everyone freeze?
For reporting 3.0, work that there's a number of criticism.
Shanti, I can't hear you. I don't. You're breaking up. I think you might be breaking up for everybody, but I know for me.
I'm not hearing Shanti.
Yeah, me too. Neither.
Yeah, his connection went bad.
Time for.
Let's see, let me see.
Maybe we can hand it over to.
Okay, yeah. Maybe hey, Gail, welcome. Great to have you joining us today.
Hi, Sean. Sorry to be late. I couldn't.
Thing happened. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, great. We can now, but you're still kind of breaking up. But people can hear me clearly, so it's okay. Great. So maybe we'll be able to circle back and have Shanti share a little more context later. Let me dive into just giving a quick overview of the MetaImpact framework. I'm going to share my screen as well, and hopefully avoid bad connections like Shanti just had. So just real quick, this is the image we use. There's several layers to it. The first layer is the impact, so that you see deep impact, clear impact, high impact, and wide impact. So the idea is that we want to have positive impact in the world, but there's different kind of categories of impact. You know, we can either transform behavior, which is clear impact. We can transform systems, which is high impact. We can transform relationships, which is wide impact, or we can transform hearts and minds. Ideally, we're transforming all of that, but much of our focus on social impact and the metrics that are out there highlight and focus on clear and high impact and don't always know how to include deep and wide impact, even though deep and wide impact is, in some respects, what most of us are wanting to see more of. So the framework includes these different types of impact, and then it measures those types of impact through these 10 different capitals, which you see in kind of the rainbow spiral: health, human, manufactured, financial, natural, and so forth. So these are 10 distinct types of capital that have been identified over the last 20, 30 years, 40 years in some cases, and are kind of acknowledged modes of measuring value. And there's a lot of different multi-capital frameworks out there. I actually built the one you're looking at based on a meta-analysis of over a dozen different types and kind of pulling them apart and rebuilding them to see what's a more integrative way to understand the relationships between these capitals, how they're related to different types of impact, and then this other layer of then how do they feed into different bottom lines. So we have the people, profit, planet, and purpose bottom lines that are composed of the different capitals. And then within the capitals, we can measure them through first, second, and third person metrics. In other words, subjective, intersubjective, and objective measures. Now, a lot more can be said, and that's why we're spending 5 days in Iceland. So I'm not going to go into more detail about it. That's just to give a quick orientation for people who are brand new to this, to kind of get a sense of what we're referring to when we talk about the MetaImpact framework. One of the key things that this framework does that I haven't seen so much in other approaches is it highlights the relationship between impact and capitals and bottom lines and metrics. So using an integral approach, it looks more at what I would call both the ontology and the epistemology of these distinctions and the methodologies that's used to connect them. So that's a lot of philosophical terms, but hopefully it gives you a sense that there's been a lot of thought put into where each of these are placed and why they're placed there, and understanding that placement within the framework helps us apply it to organizations, to projects, to companies, and even to marriages. I had a student who started using this framework in the context of their marriage to great effect, which was a delightful reminder that these kinds of integral approaches can go in many directions and support wholeness and integration. So let me just check and see if there are any quick comments or questions about the framework before I move into our first topic. All right, I'll keep moving. Feel free to type into the chat window if something comes up. So this first topic is around software development, and I want to do another screen share. Right. I'm gonna get rid of one item. Okay. So there's an organization called Just One Organics that we've started to work with, and they're wanting to create a value accounting system. And eventually they're actually wanting to create a bank that's based on the principles that they're working with. This is their website. They're basically a gentle drying company. So they take produce that's generally going to be discarded, or what's called seconds, and then they dry it in a gentle process that creates these very vibrant crystal flakes that you then can put in, salads, smoothies, food, and or just eat, directly. And it tastes so good. Oh my gosh, it's like the flavor explodes in your mouth because it's like this highly concentrated crystals of all the flavor and nutrients of the fruit and produce. So that's just to give you a quick kind of visual of what we're talking about. So they have these drying centers with 10 people in them that they're starting to launch. And we did a hackathon a few weeks ago looking at how we could use the MetaImpact framework to capture different types of data at different points in the drying process. So imagine a center with 10 people working at different points in the production line, and that we set up a mobile-based app where they can enter first-person data around how they're feeling, because kind of whether it's a good day or bad day. They can enter data around interactions they've had with coworkers or with clients or customers, and then they can enter data around the temperature of the puree, the amount of flakes that are coming off the conveyor belts, whether there's an issue that needs to be looked at in terms of maintenance, right? So it's a way of inputting first, second, and third person data points, right? So people's experience, people's relationships, and the objective, and mechanical aspects of the drying process. And then having all that data, that metadata, sorted into categories that are related to the different capitals, and then producing dashboards and reports that people can then look at on their phones or on their website. And that as customers purchase the product, they start to build out their impact profile that shows all the ways they're having impact in all 10 capitals based on supporting different batches of the product, right? Because different batches are tracked by coming from this farm or that farm, or going to this shelter or this farmer's market, or donated to this organization, a kid's sports team, and so forth, right? And so we're trying to set up a system that's tracking the value that's created pre-production, during production, and post-production, so that we can make visible the impact, deep, high, wide, and clear impact across the whole process of working with this organization. So Kayla, you were there at the hackathon. Is there anything you want to add by way of just kind of adding to what I've just shared?
I feel like you're presenting a pretty rounded, perspective on that. I mean, it's just a really exciting example to get to work with.
Okay, great. So that's just a quick example, just to start to give you a sense of, how some of this is looking, and how we're using software development and kind of the notion of cryptocurrencies and the idea of making other kinds of currencies visible, right? Opposed to just financial currency, looking at trust as a currency, looking at, knowledge and capacity, looking at relationship, looking at environmental awareness, looking at somatic awareness, right, of one's individual body, right? So all of these are flows of value that have different types of currencies, different types of way of tracking the value. And so we're building software systems that make that visible, allow us to track it over time. Let me just give another quick example.
Sean,
yes.
before you do, can you say anything about how you're building this tracking system?
Right. We are, we're the very beginning process. And so, the hackathon was an initial, part of that. We have a couple core teams that are working on it, kind of breaking down, the architecture. We're talking with 2 different design teams, software development teams. One that's based in Holochain, and then another that's based in just kind of agile, approach to Java. So we're just, we're working with another company that I'm going to give an example of now.
Okay, thank you.
And so let me give this example. So this is a multinational company based in Australia, but they have offices in Colombia, South America, South Carolina, the US, and the UK. And the Philippines, and they are an industrial Internet of Things company that primarily, or one of the main offers they have is with forklifts, and having these devices they put on the forklifts that track the users when the machines need to be maintained, or then when there's an issue. And so they primarily sell their product and service based on 4 types of capital: safety, which is health capital; cost reduction, which is financial capital; real-time data, which is knowledge capital; and then maintenance of equipment and compliance with OSHA standards. So that's manufactured capital, and can even be human capital to some extent. And I started working with them because they wanted to use the MetaImpact framework to help them track more types of data and build that into their user interfaces that are tablets and connected to the forklifts. And so I asked if they had done any research around the different types of value that their customers have reported getting by working with their products and services. They gave me like a 5-page document. I took that document and then I sorted the value statements that customers had made into the 10 capitals. And then, in a way, not surprisingly, discovered the company was actually delivering value across all 10 types of capital, even though they were selling the product just based on 4. So we then created this document, which is kind of a client-facing PDF, right? So here you can see, what's most important to you in your business today. We're here to help, and some bullet points. And then you have this, color pie, which matches the MetaImpact framework, right? So here's, clear impact, high impact, wide impact, and deep impact. Right? How can we measure the performance, skills, and health of the people in your business so that you can strengthen them? So that's a core question for having clear impact. Do you have the systems and processes in place for your businesses to be performing at full potential? So that's more of a clear impact question. Can you easily access the resources you need, and are the existing relationships with your suppliers, and customers as strong as they can be or could be? Right? So that's more of a wide impact question. And then, do all members of your businesses enjoy their work and openly help each other to become better at their job? So that's more of a deep impact question. So this is a way of starting to have a wider conversation with a potential customer who would then be buying and purchasing the forklift system. And then on the second page, there are 36, I think, types of value that the company delivers. And again, you can see the color coding, that break into the different capitals. So health, financial, manufactured, natural, social, cultural, knowledge, spiritual, psychological. And in a sense, they read over this and they pick, from each category, a few types of value that they want to track in their company, right? So this health one here, reduction in number of personal injury incidents, right? Because safety is a really big thing, right? Manufactured, increase in productivity per machine, right? So using the device to track the productivity of the machine itself. Social, increase the frequency of contact with partners and customers per week through the app, right? So, psychological, number of time, completion of goals and improvements are celebrated in a week, right? So these are things we can measure and track. And so it starts to educate the customer around how to have more value come from their relationship with the Fleet Focus, the Fleet IQ system. So again, this is just a quick example to kind of give you a sense of how some organizations are starting to use the framework in the context of software development to build software systems that start to include first, second, and third person types of data, subjective, intersubjective, and objective types of data, in order to track the value creation at different points in the customer relationship or the product development. So let me pause there and just see if there's any quick questions or comments before we shift to healthcare. All right, now I'm going to keep moving. So healthcare. So one of the reasons we wanted to go to Iceland is because we wanted to create a larger conversation with the thought leaders of Iceland around progressive approaches to capital, business organization, metrics. And so in that process, we've been looking for kind of what's a key topic in Iceland that would be a good area for us to focus on during the seminar so that we can produce as a group of people in the 5-day seminar a presentation that we deliver to the public on the last day of the seminar. So Friday from 4 to 6, we're going to be presenting at the university to anyone who wants to come and hear kind of how we see the MetaImpact framework supporting healthcare in Iceland. And so we have a pre-lecture and then a post-lecture, and we're also offering the seminar at a lower price for Icelanders to support their participation and so forth. So let me turn it over to Claudia, who's going to just mention for a couple of minutes how we arrived at this topic, and then Arnie's going to share a little bit about what healthcare from an integral perspective looks like in Iceland. Claudia?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Sean. Well, as Sean already introduced, Iceland is our destination for our seminar in April. And Iceland is looking into the Western world, one of the younger countries who just actually started to become in the early birds of industrialization after the war. Traditionally, the main industries there are fishing, and in the recent years, energy has been one of the main big industries, and probably looking back over the last 4 to 5 years, tourism has actually overrun fishing. And so we were kind of juggling these topics, and then actually we landed on healthcare, number one, because this is, I think, a topic that worldwide, globally, is driving a lot of motivations. Because without a healthy society, a healthy body, there is not much moving forward. And then Iceland has in the past already shown some very interesting democratic governance structures, and they are really very moving forward in terms of democratizing healthcare, and we will learn more about this in our seminar, and Arnie is going to talk about this a little bit. But the interesting part here is also that we have a lot of traditional wisdom in Iceland that needs also a very inviting a connection to technology. So it's a very interesting combination of ancient wisdom meets high tech, and so that's why we chose the topic healthcare. And Arnie is going to talk a little bit more about the state of healthcare in Iceland, and then we will later on also hear a little bit about the current customer that is working actually with the MetaImpact framework already in Australia. So over to Arnie.
And I'm going to share the screen of the framework while Arnie's talking so people can kind of track some of what he's saying. So go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So healthcare in Iceland is from the Nordic, is based on the Nordic Scandinavian model of a single payer healthcare system. And that is, at least in theory, provides equal access to healthcare for all citizens citizens of Iceland. So that would be a high impact if you look at the model, through the low cost of healthcare, basically in Iceland compared to, like, I think it's about 2 times as much in US. You know, just the manufacturing capital. If you look at down in the lower right. So this healthcare gives people a chance to live more dispersed around the country. So like in towns where there are maybe only 100 people, it would never pay off to have a private healthcare practice, but there is a physician at least nearby in all places. So that gives a lot of security to the population. And it also withholds the infrastructure of the country by making it feasible from a healthcare standpoint, in a way, to live in the countryside. So having a single payer system also provides a wide impact in the model through the feeling of solidarity that we all can sense, the people that live in Iceland. So, and that is definitely a form of social capital, which is one of those capitals in the lower left. And we can feel it really strongly, this solidarity, when something happens, when disaster happen in Iceland, snow floods, for example, that in the countryside that have killed a few people, and even if somebody get lost, there's a deep sense of solidarity and a lot of support that all the families get. And I definitely think that the universal healthcare system is definitely supports it and generates this solidarity, this feeling of solidarity, and the support for universal healthcare in Iceland is overwhelmingly big. It's above 90% that people want to pay and want to pay more. Now, what is happening in the tax funding of this system is that it's been going down. So there's more and more that people, specifically people with lower wages and disadvantaged people, they have less and less chance to do what they need in the healthcare system if they get sick. And despite the overwhelming majority of people that want to have put more money in the system. So we are looking at a movement towards that, towards more of an American model, which is a shame, I think, and specifically because of the various other capitals that are enhanced. So, for example, having educated healthcare professionals dispersed in all regions of the country drives up human capital, which in the respective areas. So it's knowledge and skill in those areas that comes with the healthcare professionals. And it has an escalating effect in each town, securing a more diverse population in skill and knowledge. So health, and also that healthcare professionals, they become part of the community and knowing who is who and the intricacies of the society, which can really be detrimental in healthcare at all stages of treatment. So, and having a more localized healthcare is also distributes knowledge capital in the upper left around the country and makes for a lower threshold for contacting knowledgeable people in the healthcare system. And that's one of the great benefits of living in Iceland, I think, and I've lived in 4 other countries, and definitely think that one of the big benefits in Iceland, it's very easy to contact everybody. And that's a big plus. So am I running out of time, or should I continue?
Yeah, you should wrap up just so we can be sure to check in with people. And
yeah, so another capital I would like to mention is a social capital of genealogy. So we can trace our ancestors' roots back 1,200 years. Like my wife, for example, we had the same great grandparents from 702 and 1704. They were born in those 2 years, and and I can, I could share that genealogy with you, and a lot of things like that. And then of course it's already been mentioned, the natural capital of Iceland, which is vast and hasn't been tapped into sufficiently enough, I think, for health. So I'd be really interested in for those people coming to Iceland to see what we can get out of that and how we can use those new ways of metrics to actually help just generate ideas. So basically we can start working on that. So I'll wrap it up with that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Arnie. And, I recently saw an article that Iceland was in the top 3 countries for happiest people on the earth, right? They do this kind of analysis every year, and Iceland, I think, was number 3. So that's the psychological and spiritual capital, right? So part of what we're wanting to do is look at healthcare as a case study in Iceland and see how this framework can support Iceland in seeing all the value that they're creating across this framework, right? Because Arnie started to show how the healthcare system is supporting value and cultural and social capital and psychological capital and human capital. So we want to help them see more of the value they're creating, and therefore help them understand that they're having more impact beyond just the high and clear impact, which most healthcare systems are designed to kind of measure and track. We want to help them see that they can actually track pretty easily the deep and wide impact that they're having. And then we want to highlight how health capital is intrinsically connected to the other types of value, right? And that health and well-being requires a holistic orientation, right? And so by better understanding the links between psychology and physical well-being, between social networks and physical well-being, between the natural environment and physical well-being, between skills and human capacity and physical well-being, we start to have a much healthier view of health. So that's another piece. And then we want to highlight how they can include subjective, intersubjective data, as well as the typical third-person metrics. So just to give another quick example of how this is occurring in Australia. Let's see. So I have to move a couple things around. All right. So Jorg, who is coming to the Iceland seminar as a participant, he sent me this photograph recently of this report that was done last June, Community Mental Health Model of Care and Operational Pathways. This is a country health in South Australia. It's kind of like, in a sense, like Kaiser in Australia. And then on this photograph, you can see this page, which is an appendix, where they're talking about resilience and well-being and building multiple capitals. Our work is delivered in accordance of the CHSA performance framework of an integral approach. This means, in short, paying attention to mindsets, so that's deep impact, relationships, wide impact, behavior, clear impact, and systems, a high impact. And then they go through, those a little bit. And then they talk about, in customers, we increase their knowledge capital by education, learning about concepts of minds, physiology, and so forth. In customers, we increase their psychological capital by reducing in a measurable way distress levels and symptom burdens and so forth, right? So I'm not going to go through all the examples there, but it's just to give you a quick snapshot of how a healthcare system in Australia is already starting to use this framework to start to think about health and well-being in an expanded multi-capital framework. And Tanya, who's been a big proponent of this approach in South Australia, I'm going to do a video interview with her to kind of hear about, her stories from the trenches, both the ways it's been hard to bring this model to the executives of the hospital, and also some of the successes and insights that they've had. And they recently, her team won an award for developing an integral performance model that includes many of the elements of the MetaImpact framework. So let me pause there and see. Okay, so Arnie was saying the text is not showing in the Australia document, only the front page. Okay, so I'll send those as an attachment or make those available somehow so people can take a closer look. But hopefully I was clear enough. So then there was a question from Gail. I don't understand why health in clear and financial is high. Etc. I haven't thought through the aqua perspective yet. You may want to address on the call, but I'd be curious. Or why health in clear and financial is high. Okay, so let me just go back to the framework. Show that. so that everyone can kind of track my response. So, right. So Gail is asking, why is health capital in clear impact, and why is financial capital in high impact? There are a lot of things to be said about that, but I'll just give a brief answer. Health capital generally is defined in terms of individuals and the health of the individual. And there's really clear ways to track that. Their cholesterol level, their pulse, their weight, their body mass index, right? So a lot of the ways in which we track and measure physical well-being are very clear in their kind of numerical orientation, and they're focused on an individual and the health of an individual. So it puts it in the upper right, the physical and physiology of that individual. Whereas financial capital is the health of a system, right? It's like the money, you know, in terms of revenue, in terms of debt, in terms of credit, in terms of inventory, you know, so all the different ways we track financial well-being are generally more systemic in how we measure it, track it, and generate it and increase it. And so it's more about the health of the system, right? So the health of a organization or company is, you know, in terms of financial reports is one of the key ways of talking about the system. And so it's high impact because it's systemic in nature. And then also it's an intervention point that you can have impact in the whole system by changing the financial dynamic, right? So if you lose a bunch of money through inventory loss, then that has a high impact on the whole system, right? So it has a systemic ripple effect. So that's just a quick initial response, Gail. But let me check and see other questions or comments that people might have. And you can come off mute and we can hear your voice as well if you want, or you can type it in.
Hey, Sean, I'd like to chime in just,
Yeah.
Your model is really beautiful and it's really inclusive. Yeah. And just as it relates to healthcare, because my dad was a physician, and that old thing about ounce of prevention equals pound of cure. So yeah. Education, and I'm an educator by trade. So to me, education is a huge piece of this, and I don't know how that plays into your model exactly in terms of the healthcare. But the other thing, and Gary might have some sense of this, how to support in a social network way compliance. My dad used to always say, yeah, I can, do this and that, and yet if the patient's not compliant, then and how to create the foundation for health and well-being through somatic attunement and understanding of a physical felt sense of one's vibrance to begin with, that will support continuing vibrance versus choosing things that maybe don't support that. So just all of those things came into mind as you were all sharing.
Yeah, and so it's absolutely correct. I believe that knowledge capital, which would be one place where education, right? It could also be in terms of cultural capital, like what's the knowledge in the culture, right? And Claudia was talking about the traditional wisdom in Iceland. So part of what the model does is it fosters multidimensional thinking. So it's not that education only goes in one capital. Its education goes in many capitals and produces value in many capitals. And so the idea is the framework helps us to start to see the complex and dynamic relationships between something important like education and its role in supporting well-being and health. And yeah, like social networks, in terms of supporting, compliance and taking your meds. And so it's like when you start to expand your vision of healthcare and you start capitals bring to supporting an individual in a particular process, then you start to make visible the value that those them more. So like imagine a physician tracking kind of who's at home, who can help remind you of when to take your meds, meds or to notice when data visible in the system, and then even have an app, and this gets back to the value accounting, software, where the user can then input that data into, so that the doctor doesn't only see the third person stats on their cholesterol and their weight and their diet, but they see like the mood dynamics and the relationship dynamics, and they can start to factor that into kind of the overall care and process of response patients need. So I'll take one more kind of comment or question, and then we'll shift to Shanthi, kind of wrapping things up and just sharing a little bit about the early bird around Iceland for those who are interested. And of course, this was just to kind of start the conversation. Gary? Yeah.
It's interesting how healthcare has traditionally emphasized very much the deep, but not so much, the clear, but not so much the deep.
Yeah.
So what I would just like to briefly say is that I work with an organization now that counsels families when their children are diagnosed with retinoblastoma, and at Children's Hospital LA, and that organization has the strong support of the Vision Center because they recognize now some of these deep qualities that were being ignored, and also certainly some of the wide ones as well.
Exactly.
And so by supporting us, they are able to provide a service to the families and to the patients that really is something that medicine has traditionally completely ignored or been unable to even address. So there are movements in this direction. I love the idea of looking at these different capitals and a profit and loss statement.
Yeah, no, I think your example is spot on, Gary. And part of it is that a lot of hospitals and healthcare systems are actually engaging many, if not most, of the capitals, but they're stuck using these older models of what they're doing, and so they're not actually tracking what they're really doing. Right. So part of what we want to do is we want to give them expressive capacity to better understand what they're doing, make it more visible so they can do it even better. Because you're absolutely right, to treat disease and illness in the upper right with clear impact in health, you need to engage the hearts and minds of the patients and their families. You need to support the relationships. You need to look at their environment and systems. And, so to really have clear impact, you actually need to have deep impact and wide impact and high impact, right? Yeah. And so a lot of healthcare approaches kind of have figuring that out, but they're fumbling in the dark. And so this is designed to kind of help bring that into relief so they can more powerfully do what they're already realizing they are doing or they need to do.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Gail, one last comment, and then we're going to shift to Shanthi. You're on mute. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. I'm really struck by what appears to be the ease with which this approach lets say lay people, for want of a better term, communicate about these complex systems. The wheel that you showed from the forklift company compresses a lot of the work that you've done in the background into a very accessible and very practical format, which most of the systems, Aqua, multi-capital, et cetera, stuff is not really accessible for folks. So I really want to salute you on that. I'd love to dig in more. And offline, I want to find out more about the Iceland event. We've done some work there, and there's some folks I might be able to direct to participate.
Great. Yeah,
so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gail, for saying what you said, because I've been building integrative models for 20 years. And this is the first one where non-integral people have looked at it and said, I like that. Like, that makes sense to me. So it's like it took me 20 years to finally come up with the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And it really speaks to what you're saying, because it makes something available to people that is very powerful. And so, really value you validating that, because that's what we're discovering as we share this with more people.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to talk with you more about it another time.
Great. All right, so let me hand it over to Shanthi so we can just share a few things as we wrap up. And thank you all for joining us. Shanthi?
Yes, so we're super excited about spending a week together in Iceland using the MetaImpact framework to design wisdom economies. And we hope that some of you will join us. Our early bird registration deadline ends on this Saturday, February 10th, at the end of the business day Pacific. The price is $29.50. It includes lunch, meals, and snacks. There's going to be an option for a pre-seminar kind of like tour of Iceland the week before. There's more information on the website. There's also a 3-pay option that's not listed on the website where you can split that up into 3 payments, but we would need the first payment by this Saturday, February 10th. And you can email Claudia if you're interested in that option. We also have one last kind of special bonus for those who are going to register out of seeing this webinar call. We're going to offer a special mastermind group that's going to meet once in April, once in May, once in June to take all of this amazing learning from the week-long seminar and really help you with others of us supporting. And if you register before Saturday, you have the option of participating in that at no additional charge. I wanted to mention is there be a community of practice opening up in a Slack channel next week for those who are registered with some additional materials. We'll be starting our conversation, starting to get to know each other, and there will be one virtual for the actual event to really get the juices flowing so that when we hit the ground in Iceland, we'll be all set to really go deep. And so I hope some of you will join us. And it's been great to be on the call with you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And feel free to email us with follow-up questions, ideas, or feedback. Have a great day.